Like many people, I was skeptical when I first saw Tailwind out in the wild. Seeing 15 plus classes on a component triggered a trauma response from the bootstrap days. But you can build some very cool stuff with Tailwind, and you can build them fast. But if you're watching this video, I assume you already know the basics. So in today's video, I'm gonna be talking about implementing dark and light theme the proper way, animations to make your website dynamic, plugins to extend Tailwind's functionality, using Tailwind merge, and optimizing for production. Let's jump right in. I mean, it's 2024. If you don't have a dark mode in your website, what are you even doing? Now there's a few ways that you can implement dark mode using Tailwind, but I'm gonna be talking about the class method specifically because that's the recommended approach. Now, what does the class strategy actually mean? So class strategy is basically adding a light or dark class on your HTML element and then using Tailwind's dark variants for all of your components. For example, I have a paragraph here. It has a darker gray for light mode, and then for dark mode it has lighter gray basically. We can see that here, and then you can choose which elements you actually want to have a dark and light mode, which you don't want them to have, but that's essentially how this works. And if you look at the HTML here, you see that when we switch to dark mode, we have a class dark, and then all of the elements on the page use the dark variants in Tailwind to basically choose the correct colors. And if I switch to light, it's going to use the light variant in Tailwind. I'm also storing the theme in local storage because if I refresh, I want the theme to stay the same, whatever I chose previously. And whenever my components load, they're gonna get the previous value from local storage, and then it's gonna add the correct class on the HTML element. I have a context here in the provider where I can do all of that. So whenever I click this, or I have another button here, basically does the same thing. And I can see the class added to HTML, and all the components use the correct colors. Now the reason why I think the class strategy is the best is because you have explicit control of which components you want to have dark or light mode. If you want some components to stay in color or whatever that is, you might choose not to do that, because if you go with the class strategy, you need to add light and dark variants across your theme. And also CSS handles the transition from light to dark or the other way around very smoothly. And lastly, this avoids any JavaScript that you need in order to change all of the components and their colors. Now, if you browse through the internet, you've probably seen a lot of websites using animations to make their website a little bit more dynamic. Usually when you load a big landing page, as you scroll down, there's going to be animations that makes the elements appear slowly on the page, which is a cool way to make your website pop a little bit. And Tailwind has some predefined animation classes you can use, like spin, bounce, pulse, and it's easy as adding animate pulse. And this is gonna make your component pulse basically with the color. Now this is pretty cool. It only needs one class to make this work, and if you hover over, you can see what it actually does, what the CSS is actually implements. But the cool thing is also that you can add your own animation classes. If you go to your Tailwind config, you can actually extend the theme to add keyframes and animations and basically describe your own animation. I'll define here my own custom animation in my Tailwind config, and I'm basically extending the theme and defining keyframes based on the name of the animation, and then you can define any kind of CSS here. So basically this is going to translate the object 20% below, and the opacity is going to start from 0.7, and then when the transition goes to 100, the element is going to stay in its place and opacity is going to be 1. And then I'm defining my own Tailwind class here basically that has a sliding bottom, and then it uses the sliding bottom animation, gives the time and the type of transition here we have. If I reload my page, you can see the element popping up a little bit from the bottom, which is usually what I've seen on websites. And you have your whole paragraph slide in whenever the page loads or whenever the element is visible. And there's some accessibility considerations when it comes to animations, because some animation can be really obnoxious and some people actually have trouble looking at animations. So Tailwind has, for all of the predefined animations, they have reduced motion variants as well. So if you use animations and you want your website to be accessible, it's probably best to use the motion reduce or motion safe variants. The plugins for Tailwind are very useful and basically just allows you to extend whatever Tailwind has predefined already, and think of it as a component library for your web application. You can use a Tailwind plugin to add a bunch of extra classes or components, or even integrate with other libraries. I'm not really gonna bore you with the benefits of using Tailwind plugins, but it's basically just improves your workflow. You can have design consistency across your web application or multiple applications if you work in a company, and you have the community support from the community because they actually build these plugins. And there are some few very famous ones that you can use, like the Tailwind UI, which I think is paid, but the one I'm using here is the typography, and this just adds a lot more fonts that I can use for my website. There's some great ones out there. I recommend you checking out any Tailwind plugins you can find, put them in your website, see how they work, play around. And also, many of the plugins allow for customization, so you can extend the plugin's functionality and add stuff of your own, which is great. And as you work with Tailwind, you're probably going to encounter a scenario where you're going to add multiple classes that actually do the same thing. As you leave your code and then come back to it, sometimes you forget what you've put there, and because you have a lot of different classes here, it can be very easy to miss what's actually in there, what's not. And adding duplicate classes seems like a small issue, but I've spent hours trying to figure out why my new class is not showing. But there's some cool ways you can actually get around this, but one of which is having a VS Code plugin that tells you if you have a duplicate class. For example, I'm gonna add another animation here, and now this is highlighting the two classes I've added that actually apply the same CSS properties. That's one way to do it, and the other way is to use the Tailwind merge package. I've already got Tailwind merge installed here. I've added a couple of classes here that are duplicate basically, and my extension still complains that they're duplicate, but I'm using Tailwind merge, so this is not really gonna have both of the classes applied to the element. We can see Animal Plus, and the other one is not here basically. So it's gonna add the second one or the superseding one. If I change how these are added, see, now it adds the other one. But yeah, that's the Tailwind merge. Now, one place where this is very useful, if you're actually building a component library for your company, you have multiple teams that use this component library, and if you want to allow the teams to extend the classes and add their own styles, then you're probably gonna have a component that's exported and used in another place, and you don't really know what classes are being added from wherever this is used. So using Tailwind merge is actually a great way to not have duplicate classes and basically slim down on your Tailwind export. Now, it's not really a problem of visually seeing the element. If you have multiple classes, Tailwind is gonna compile all of those classes into CSS, and basically you can bloat your CSS a lot when you don't need it. So this is basically optimizing your CSS. If you're using Tailwind and you want your websites to be very fast and pass all of the site speed checks, you need to think about optimizing your Tailwind for production. Now, there's a few ways you can do this. The first one, I think, and the most useful one, is minifying. You can do this with a couple of ways. Whenever you compile your Tailwind, you can use the Tailwind CLI to add minify, and this is gonna minify your CSS output. And you can also use the post CSS plugin, which is actually gonna produce a minified version of your CSS. And then the next thing that's useful to do is purging unused CSS. And this also goes for duplicate Tailwind classes, because one of the classes is not going to be used, so basically it's just bloating your CSS and making it longer and longer. And there's also plugins for this. You can use the purge CSS Tailwind plugin, and this is going to help remove all of the unused CSS. And then the last thing that you can do for your CSS is to leverage content delivery networks or CDNs to serve your CSS on your website. CDNs is widely used for serving your assets very fast on your website. You can serve any kind of asset, images, fonts, CSS, JavaScript basically, and this will actually make your website a little bit faster. Well, that's all the Tailwind tips I have for you today. That's been pretty much it for this video. I hope you liked it. Subscribe if you haven't already. Like 97% of the people that watch my videos are not actually subscribed, so I'd appreciate subscribing. That's gonna allow me to make better and better videos in the future. If you have any feedback, put it down in the comments below. I go through all the comments on all my videos. And yeah, that's been pretty much it. Thank you very much for watching. Enjoy the rest of your day. Happy coding. Bye.